What's up, guys? Skip Kinus here, and today we're going to be going over the Minibak from Modern Warfare 2, or as it's known in real life, the PP-19 Bison. Now, I had mentioned in the video on the Vaznov 9K, or Vityaz, that there was a gun in this game that I had initially wanted to do a video on before that one, as development for that gun stemmed from the other. However, as mentioned, I had another video dropping that week testing out a neat trick and using the Vityaz to do so I felt it'd be more appropriate to release the video on the Vaznov 9K. And although I did reference the other gun that I had wanted to do, I'm certain none of you could guess what the mystery gun I was referring to in that video, given my master level of trickery, actually was. But today we're going to be going over that gun, the PP-19 Bison. So what exactly is this thing? How does the gun itself not only work, but also the very alien-looking magazine it uses? And most importantly, was or is this gun actually used? Let's get into it. The PP-19 was developed in 1993 by Izmash. There are many different variants featuring many different chamberings. However, the most popular of all the models is the one utilized in the 9x18 Makarov cartridge. The gun itself was built at the request of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs and was intended for counter-terrorist units as well as police forces who wanted a fast and accurate gun for close-quarters combat. It should be noted that the engineering team was headed by a guy named Viktor Kalashnikov, son of Mikhail Kalashnikov, whom invented a gun that I'm sure none of you have ever actually heard of. To add to that, a guy by the name of Alexei Dragunov was also on the team, son of, I'm going to assume that's Yevgeny Dragunov? Anyways, regardless of what the first name is, the last name is what's important here, because we all know what Mr. Dragunov invented. The Dragunov. Anyways, looking at the Bison, one notices that it has a very AK-like look, and essentially, that is what it is. They were built off existing AKS-7040 receivers and share around 60% of the same parts. However, that being said, these do not operate 100% like an AK, but we'll get into that shortly. Let's talk about this gun's chambering. So the Bison mainly utilizes the small 9x18 Makarov cartridge. There are, of course, other variants chambered in cartridges like 9x19, 380 ACP, as well as even a 7.62 Tokarev one. Which, side note, I thought it was cool they did like a few in that last chambering because this round is just freaking cool, but evidently those ones didn't really use that classic helical magazine. They supposedly used just like kind of like a standard stick mag. Honestly, I was trying to find pictures of the 7.62 Tokarev one specifically, but yeah, I couldn't find any pictures, and as mentioned, it doesn't use a helical mag, so very likely not as cool as the other chambering. But anyways, as mentioned, the more common variant is chambered for the 9mm Makarov round, and this provides a gun with a relatively low recoil, as 9 Makarov is really kind of just like a spicier 380 ACP. Plus, a cool little bonus that the 9 Makarov gives the Bison is due to its lower power, it doesn't actually send the bolt fully rearwards to like slam into the receiver. It only travels a little ways past the cartridge till the spring causes it to stop and begins sending it forward. Which, by the bolt doing this, it adds to the recoil reduction of the gun. It should be noted that they do have some more potent 9mm Makarov ammo that does send the bolt slamming against the rear of the receiver. And I would imagine that the 9x19 and 7.62 Tokarev will also just send the bolt to the rear of the receiver. Now, of course, that's all cool, but the one most distinguishing feature of the Bison is, of course, its magazine. As opposed to using your standard stick or drum mags, they went with what's called a helical mag in order to increase magazine capacity, but at the same time keep the magazine more compact than a standard drum mag. And capacity changes between cartridges. However, the standard 9mm Makarov model holds 64 rounds, which it's kind of neat. It should be noted that it originally held 67 rounds. However, they dropped it down to 64 as Makarov ammunition came in packets of 16, meaning you wouldn't happen to open up a 5th pack just to grab 3 extra rounds. Now, originally the magazines were made with an aluminum housing, but much like all modern guns, they quickly switched to one made of polymer. The magazine itself, though providing much more ammo than a stick mag and staying more compact than a drum, also looking cool as hell, would end up being the thorn in the Bison's side, as they tended to have reliability issues, which is what would end up causing them to abandon the Bison in favor of the Vityaz and its standard stick magazine. Which, while on the topic of magazines, that does beg the question though, how does this thing work? We'll get into that in a minute. First off, let's talk about how the gun itself actually works. Because as mentioned, it shares around 60% of the same parts as the standard AK, and hell, you take a look at this thing, it looks like a standard AK. However, due to its use of a lesser powered cartridge, it's able to use a more simplified mechanism, which I think is a great time to hop on the IRL cam, and I'll show you what I mean. So right here I have my standard AK rifle. Do note this is more of a 47 pattern given its 7.62x39 chambering. However, the 47 model works exactly the same as the 74 model. Parts are just sized a little different. And right here I have my brother's Vityaz, which it's not a Bison, obviously, but they operate the exact same. In fact, as mentioned, the Vityaz actually stems from the PP Bison, and really, doesn't really lack too many features that the Vityaz has. In fact, really the only main difference I'd say is there's like a cutout like right here, and then there's something to hold that big helical mag. But all in all, they work the same. The way the AK series of rifles tend to work is gas follows the bullet as it's fired and gets vented up right through this gas tube, which sitting inside that gas tube is the piston on your bolt carrier. As the gas travels through that gas tube, it begins to push on this piston, and while it's pushing on this piston, this bolt head is actually sitting more like that. And while it's sitting like that, it's locked into recesses in the receiver. Now, as this bolt carrier is pushed, this bolt head is kind of just stuck in position because, again, it's stuck behind some metal pieces right there. So the bolt carrier begins to move rearward, and note there is this little piece right here, and that is running along a track. So as the bolt carrier is moving rearward, this isn't technically going rearward with it just yet, but it is starting to rotate. Which, once it reaches full rotation, it is clear of all the metal blocking it, and the entire bolt assembly can move rearward, is returned back into position via this spring, and as it's returned into position, this bolt head rotates back into battery, and you're ready to go again. And as mentioned, this is pretty much how all AK pattern rifles work. Minus, of course, the Vityaz, and more in relation to this video, the PP Bisons. Given the pistol caliber chamberings, this one's a 9x19, this will be the same for both the 9mm Makarov, 7.62 Tokarev, 380, all that. Given all these pistol chamberings, you don't actually need that whole locking, rotating bolt system. All these guns rely on is the mass of the bolt and the recoil spring, and pretty much just works just fine. You don't need to have that fancy gas system. A fancy gas system, I will say, does help on submachine guns like that, but you don't technically need it. You can run without having the whole locking system. So with that being said, though there is technically this tube right here, there is no tapped hole here for gas to actually flow into that because, again, it's not needed. Now what that tube's actually doing is mostly just, well, it's mainly just there because the original 74s would have it, and rather than just pulling it off, you might as well just leave it on there and tap your port. But it also does help to kind of guide the actual bolt, which, by the way, as mentioned, there is no rotating bolt head, no locking system, all that. It's just what you call straight blowback. So you might be wondering why this, what it looks like the remnants of the piston are still there. The reason for that is to just add some more weight to the bolt, because as mentioned, straight blowback kind of relies on having a little bit of a heavier bolt, as well as, having some good spring tension. So they figure you might as well just keep the metal there for added weight to the bolt. So that gets how the gun itself works out of the way, but the bigger question still remains. How does this helical mag work? Now, while they look complicated, they are simple in principle. On the inside, you have this screw that the cartridges run along. And as a round is stripped from the feed lips, the screw rotates under spring tension and provides another cartridge in the previous one's spot. Again, very simple in practice. However, it should come as no surprise that it's a lot more complicated to manufacture than your standard stick magazine. And that, coupled with the fact that they suffer from reliability issues, would lead towards the Vityaz being developed and replacing the Bison. That being said, the Vityaz wasn't developed till 2004 and didn't enter service till around 2008, whereas the Bison was accepted into service at the very end of 1996. Leading us on to our final topic, was this thing actually used in that time span despite the problem? And to further add, with the Vityaz now on the table, does it still find use today? Which the answer to both those questions is yes. Cool enough, these things were, and in small numbers still are used to this day. They of course saw service under Russia, obviously the developers of the gun, in places like Chechnya and Dagestan, plenty of other small little conflicts, supposedly even being used in the current war in Ukraine right now. And they're still used in general by their Federal Security Service, Ministry of Justice. Again, smaller numbers, and they are slowly getting replaced by the Vityaz. But for the time being, the PP Bison still does find some use. To which, to add to this, Russia's not the only user, with Vietnam also issuing them in very small numbers to some of their special forces, under the designation SN9P. However, that's about it for who actually uses this very cool alien-looking submachine gun, and that's also about it for this video on the Minibak from Modern Warfare 2, or as it's known in real life, the PP-19 Bison. I hope y'all enjoyed the video as much as I personally enjoyed making it. I hope to see y'all again on the next Modern Warfare 2 gun in real life video. Because as routinely mentioned here on this channel, we are doing every single gun from this game.